You don't notice the heat the way your birds do. You walk outside, feel the weight of the air before 8 in the morning, and you go back in. You have the air conditioning, you have the refrigerator, you have the option to not be outside right now, which is the option you take. Your birds don't have that option. It's the first week of August, and in Northern Virginia, where I'm recording this, the forecast has held at 92 to 98 degrees for 9 straight days. I was at the kitchen window this morning, coffee going. A blue jay was nowhere to be seen, but I was watching a pair of cardinals sitting in the shade of the holly bush by the fence. They weren't doing anything, not foraging, not singing, just sitting with their beaks slightly open, barely moving. And the thing I keep forgetting and keep having to remind myself of is that what I was watching was not a bird having a lazy morning. Today, I want to go through 7 things that actually happen to your birds in a heat wave. Some are behavioral, things you can see from your window if you know what to look for. Some are physiological, happening inside a bird's body that no amount of watching will show you, but that explain everything you observe. One of them is about what you may be doing in your yard right now that is making an already hard week significantly harder. And the last one I've saved for last, because it is the reason I started thinking about all of this in the first place. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave, because what happens in your yard during heat is quieter and more serious than most people realize. Stay until number 7. That one is the one I keep coming back to. Number 1. The temperature your birds are already running. Here's something most people don't know about the birds in their yard. They are already hot. On a cool spring morning, when the air temperature is 55 degrees Fahrenheit, a black-capped chickadee's core body temperature is running at around 108 degrees. A northern cardinal sits at 106, a mourning dove around 104. Those numbers don't leave a lot of room. Most songbirds have a safe thermal ceiling, a zone where the body can regulate temperature without serious cost. That ceiling sits at roughly 113 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit before cells begin to sustain damage that can't be undone. On a 98-degree day in direct sun, the operative environmental temperature a bird's body actually experiences, factoring in radiant heat from the ground, from your roof, from the blacktop of the driveway, can approach 120 degrees. The research on avian thermoregulation, work published in PNAS over the past several years, has documented what happens when bird species hit that ceiling. It doesn't look the way you'd expect. There is no sudden collapse. The bird gets quieter. It stops moving. Its behavior shifts in ways that, from a distance, look like the bird is simply resting. It is not resting. The chickadee weighs 11 grams, the weight of 2 pennies. It has almost no thermal mass to absorb excess heat. When the temperature around that bird climbs fast, its margin shrinks fast. What you're watching when a chickadee goes still in the July shade is not leisure. It is thermal management. The difference between those two things is the entire story. I used to read that kind of sentence in a bird book and think, okay, sure. Then I started actually paying attention to the temperatures in my yard in summer, and the sentence stopped being abstract. Number 2, what you're seeing from your window and what it means. If you've watched your yard during a heat wave, you've seen this. The cardinal sits with his wings held slightly away from his body, feathers lifted just a little, beak open. The robin stands at the birdbath and stays longer than usual. The mourning dove on the fence post has its throat vibrating rapidly, like a small engine idling. Each of those things is a specific cooling strategy. None of them are random. The cardinal holding his wings out is not displaying aggression. That's tylo-erection, feather positioning for airflow. By holding the wings just away from the body, the bird creates a narrow channel of moving air against the skin beneath the wing, where blood vessels run close to the surface and there are fewer feathers. The bird is treating its own underside like a radiator. The mourning dove with the vibrating throat. That's gular fluttering, not panting, not breathing hard, not struggling, something more efficient than any of those. The dove vibrates the thin membrane of its throat at up to 600 oscillations per minute, turning the surface area of that membrane into an evaporative cooler. Work from the University of California, Davis has documented in detail how mourning doves sustain core temperature during heat events that should theoretically overwhelm them. The dove is the surprise. For all that they look fragile, mourning doves are better designed for heat than most of the other birds in your yard. The blue jay that comes to your bath on a hot morning isn't just cooling down, it's doing structural maintenance. Heat degrades feather integrity, and blue jays compensate by bathing aggressively and then preening in shade for longer than usual. What looks like grooming is the bird maintaining equipment it depends on to survive. Here's what I want you to notice the next time you're watching on a hot afternoon. Every bird that looks slightly off, beak open, wings held wide, oddly still, is doing something specific. They are solving a problem. The resources they need to solve it are either in your yard or they aren't. That detail matters more than it seems. Number 3, the water problem and what it means for your yard. A bird's body is roughly 60 to 65% water by mass. That number holds across most songbird species. On a normal day in May, a cardinal loses water through respiration, through foraging, through the regular work of being alive. The loss is modest. In mild weather, a bird can meet most of its water needs passively through what it eats. Insects carry water, berries carry water, even seeds carry some. During a heat wave, none of that math works anymore. Every evaporative cooling strategy I just described, gular, fluttering, tie-low erection, bathing, pulls water from a bird's body faster than diet can replace it. Every second, a mourning dove flutters its throat at 600 oscillations per minute. It is losing moisture it cannot get from a seed. Every robin standing in your bird bath for 3 minutes instead of 30 seconds is doing exactly what its body is asking it to do. Cornell Lab of Ornithology has documented that during peak heat events, some species need 2 to 3 times their normal daily water intake just to stay functional. For a chickadee, 11 grams, the weight of 2 pennies, a water deficit of 10% of body weight can begin affecting behavior within hours. Now, watch what happens to your yard specifically. If you have a bird bath, you probably know to keep it full. But the temperature of the water matters. A bird bath sitting in full afternoon sun in late July can reach water temperatures of 90 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit by 2 o'clock. Water that warm doesn't cool a bird down. It may add thermal stress. Pay attention to this. The bath itself needs shade, not the birds finding shade near the bath, but the water staying reasonably cool through the hottest part of the afternoon. I moved mine last August from the edge of the patio, where it got full western sun all afternoon, to the base of the holly bush along the fence. The change in how often birds used it in the afternoons was immediate. I noticed it within a day. The research on this is not complicated. Birds will not drink warm water if cooler water is available. If your bath goes unvisited between noon and 4 during a heat wave, that may be the entire reason. Number 4. The things in your yard that are making this harder. I want to be honest about why I'm saying this the way I'm going to say it, because I did all of these things, not out of indifference, out of not knowing. And I found out what I was doing wrong not from reading about it, but from watching what happened in my yard and then going to look up why. The first one is sweet. Sweet is a winter food. The fats in it are designed to provide high-calorie fuel during cold months when insects aren't available. In temperatures above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, suet begins to soften. Above 80 degrees, it goes liquid and rancid. What drips through the cage and onto the ground below your feeder is not just wasted food. It is a concentrated growth medium for bacteria and mold, sitting in the heat, visited by birds that then carry whatever they've picked up to your bird bath and introduce it to the water. I had a suet feeder running the 2nd July. I was paying close attention. I remember pulling it down one afternoon and finding it completely liquefied inside the cage, dark yellow, starting to smell. I had left it up because the red-bellied woodpecker was using it, and I didn't want to take it away. That was not a good reason. But there's a part of this that's less intuitive and more unsettling. A dark plastic tube feeder sitting in direct sunlight on a 95-degree day can reach internal temperatures of 130 degrees or higher. At those temperatures, mold develops in hours, not days. Moisture from seeds and bird droppings collects at the base and creates a growth environment for Salmonella. This is not theoretical. Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Project Feeder Watch has documented backyard feeder disease outbreaks with clear spikes during summer months. The bird landing on your July feeder, the one you filled last Wednesday because you were busy, may be eating something that actively weakens it at the exact moment its body needs every available resource for heat management. I'm not saying take your feeders down. I'm saying know what you're running and make a conscious choice. In summer, cleaning every 4 to 5 days is not optional. The suite comes down until October. Seeds in plastic tube feeders in direct sun get rotated on a short schedule, or the feeder moves to shade. Your birds are already working harder than usual. The things you put out for them should not be adding to that load. I learned this the wrong way. You don't have to. Number 5. What most people get wrong about heat waves in birds. Most of the concern around heat waves in birds goes to midday. The visible crisis, the beak open at 2 in the afternoon, the wings held out, the bird barely moving. That's real. But the night tells a different part of the story, one I didn't fully understand until I went and looked at the research. Most songbirds have a nighttime cooling window. When temperatures drop after sunset, a bird's body uses the cooler air to shed accumulated heat and slightly reduce its core temperature for sleep. This is not torpor. That's a deeper metabolic reduction used by some species, most notably the ruby-throated hummingbird. This is just the ordinary thermal reset a bird's body needs after a hot day. A small, necessary recovery. During a multi-day heat wave, that recovery doesn't happen. When overnight lows stay above 75 degrees Fahrenheit, which has become more common across the mid-Atlantic region over the past several decades, according to NOAA data, birds go into the next morning already carrying the previous day's thermal load. Then the temperature climbs again. Then the next night is warm again. The deficit compounds. Research from the University of Exeter on urban heat island effects has compared what happens to bird populations during multi-day heat events versus single-day peaks. Multi-day events are significantly more lethal, not because any single hour is more extreme, because the cumulative debt adds up without a window to recover. The bird you're watching on day 3 of a heat wave is not the same bird, physiologically, as the one you saw on day 1. I started checking the overnight low after I understood this. Not just the high temperature for the day, the overnight low. That number tells me whether the birds in my yard are getting a real night or whether they're starting the next morning already behind. It's a small shift in what I look for. It changed how I think about the whole week. Number 6. The species that will surprise you. If I tried to rank the birds in my yard by heat vulnerability, I'd get it wrong if I went by size alone. Small birds, most vulnerable, larger birds, less so. That's the intuitive version. The data tells a more complicated story. Black-capped chickadees and tufted titmice are small and vulnerable, as expected. Their mass gives them almost no thermal buffer. But the bird that repeatedly surprises researchers is the American goldfinch. At around 14 grams, just slightly heavier than a chickadee, goldfinches show behavioral signs of heat stress at lower ambient temperatures than comparable mass species. Their threshold for shade-seeking kicks in earlier. They go quiet on hot days, faster than the titmice sitting next to them. Work published in the Journal of Avian Biology has found that goldfinches are less heat-tolerant than their size implies, and researchers haven't fully explained why. The mourning dove handles heat better than most people would guess, that throat-vibrating thing they do. It is a genuinely efficient system. They'll tolerate conditions that send other species into hiding much earlier in the day. The ruby-throated hummingbird is its own category entirely. Female hummingbirds weigh around 3.5 grams, among the smallest warm-blooded animals in North America. but hummingbirds can reduce their metabolism dramatically and enter a torpor-like state when conditions demand it. Research from the University of Washington suggests they are more thermally adaptable than their tiny size implies. There's something worth sitting with in that, the smallest birds sometimes carrying the most flexible tools. But the most vulnerable bird in your yard during a heat wave is probably none of these. It's a fledgling, a bird between 2 and 6 weeks old, still developing its ability to regulate its own temperature, still learning shade-seeking behavior. The heat hits fledglings faster and harder than adults, and you can't see most of them. They're in the shrubs, in the understory, in the places you don't look, surviving, if things go well, without any help from you at all. Number 7. The reason I started thinking about all of this. I've saved this one for last because it has to be last. Last July, the heat held for 11 straight days in my county, highs above 94 degrees Fahrenheit every day, overnight lows that never dropped below 73. I was working from home that week, and I found myself at the kitchen window more than I'd usually be there. Not watching exactly, just checking. The Tuesday couple was there. That's what I've come to call a pair of chickadees that has been visiting my feeders for 4 winters now, almost always on Tuesday mornings, somewhere between 7 and 8 a.m. I don't know with certainty that these are the same 2 birds from the beginning. I can't know that. But the pattern has held, and you get attached to a pattern the way you get attached to anything that keeps showing up when you need it to. On day 8 of the heat event, at 2:14 in the afternoon, I watched one of them come to the birdbath under the holly bush. The bath I had moved to was shade the previous summer and never moved back. It stood at the edge of the bath for a moment. Then it drank. Then it stepped in slowly, up to its belly, and it stood there, not bathing, not splashing, just standing in the water. I watched for about 3 minutes. The bird barely moved. And I had this experience I don't have great words for. Not quite relief, not quite satisfaction. Something quieter than either of those. The feeling of having accidentally done something right. I want to be careful here. Not gratitude, not recognition, not anything that required the bird to know I was there. What I was watching was a small body using a resource that happened to be available because I had made a decision the previous August and not undone it. The bath was in the shade. The water was cool. The bird came. It stood there for 3 minutes on the 8th day of a heat wave. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with that. What I can tell you is that it's the reason I notice the overnight low now. It's the reason I clean the feeder on the right schedule. And it's the reason I'm still making this. The cardinals will be back in the holly bush tomorrow morning. Beaks slightly open, barely moving. And now you know what you're looking at when you see that. The heat wave in your yard is not an abstract problem. It is a specific, recurring event that your birds are already managing, as well as they can, with whatever is available to them. Some of what's available is yours to provide or not. The bath in the shade, the clean feeder, the sweat you took down before July. None of this requires a lot. It requires knowing what's happening, which is what today was about. If you've watched your birds during a heat wave and noticed something that stayed with you, a bird doing something you didn't expect, or a moment that made you change something in your yard, I want to hear it. Those are the comments I carry the longest. I want to hear about it. I read everyone. I'll see you in the next one.